Okay, thank you, Ryan, for this very rich and challenging presentation. I guess there are going to be some questions from our audience. Okay, Vemund. Can you wait for the mic? Okay, Vemund, next we'll go to you.
Good morning. It was a very interesting presentation. I would like to ask you a question about UKIP. And is there a difference between the UKIP and British National Party, except for the electoral results? In other words, in which point did Farage manage to convince the voters, whereas Griffin didn't manage to convince? Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Vemund. Yeah, and then Mr. Demergis. Then, okay. I think I saw you all.
Yes, it's more of a comment in the spirit of a workshop. I would congratulate the speaker because I think he had a very good, struck a very good balance between theory and presenting material from his research. And when you work with this kind of populist discourse, it's very easy to get used to the way of speaking, to get used to notion and characterization that are really incredible. So I want to remind our students who are working on populist discourse that we have a very rich material in Greece. For example, the so-called lost homeless, Chamenes Patrides. If you see someone like Yanis Kapsis, which is an incredible populist, and it's just, he can say the most amazing thing, and I'm surprised that he gets away with it. Or something that is also totally incredible, that it's been possible to impose on the whole, almost the whole Greek population that we refer to the neighboring country as the Skopje states, and inhabited by Skopjeans speaking the Skopjean language. I mean, it's totally incredible. And to see how this populism works, and it's possible to impose this kind of notion. And after a while, you say it without thinking about it, because it's been so ingrained in the whole public discourse. Thank you.
Mr. Demergis.
Thank you. Sorry for not being from the very beginning of your talk, but I find it very interesting, especially since you try to combine both a discursive analysis of populism and an organizational analysis of populism in terms of how political structures and populism as a regime is fabricated. And I also found it very interesting that that you made explicit references to distinct emotions rather than using oversweeping categories like passion or affect or whatever. Then I would also like to comment on your key characteristics of discourse, populist discourse. It seems to me that actually this is not the key characteristics of populist discourse, but this is the key elements of the emotional energy of populism. That is to say, it would, of course, there is always a relationship between discourse and emotions, because we are always using linguistic labels in order to describe and express emotional states. But actually what you've been describing, it's more or less an emotional energy rather than discursive elements. And then I wonder why you just mention pain, fear, and hope with their ingredients, and not, for instance, and not, for instance, include trust or confidence or loyalty or even devotion for the leader, for the regime, or whatever. And another final comment is that, as you said, this analysis has to be concretized in terms of being specific in different political cultural settings. And this begs the question whether the totalitarian destiny of your analysis is the destiny of any kind of populist discourse or populist political organization. Just for the sake of the argument, let me remind you that at his latest book, Poulantzas, in 1978, if I remember well, he pointed out that there is a totalitarian element in the welfare state itself. So totalitarian element, as well as the discursive element, is present in very many different settings, both political as well as discursive. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Demergis. Yannis Stavrakakis. And then one more question, then we have to go to answers because we're already back in time.
What I wanted to say was partly mentioned by Nikos also. First of all, this totalitarian passage, because other people would probably argue that neoliberalism is following it. I mean, totalitarianism might be the next step following post-democracy to a certain extent, if you follow this line of argument. So my one question would be the same with Nikos. Is this, and of course, I found very interesting that Nikos used the word destiny, which is not a scientific word. It's not a concept, obviously. It's a theological, or it comes from another type of discourse. So, would you introduce some element of contingency there? That okay, in some cases this might happen, in some other cases that might not happen. In a similar way that this could happen with other types of regimes, other types of ideologies, and so on and so forth. Or not? Or is there something intrinsic to populism that leads to this sort of outcome? And the second point I wanted to raise was, and what I found very interesting in your work in general, and your book also, is that you managed to dislodge this very widespread idea that populist mobilization and populist politics is hostile to institutions, has nothing to do. As soon as one of these movements gets to government, then it shifts to another. So you show very well how there is some sort of institutional renewal, which might be part and parcel of a populist mobilization. Mm-hmm. And I wanted you to say a few more things about that, how this changes the landscape of the debate on populism. Thank you.
Okay, one last question over here. I'm very sorry, we can take more questions because we're already running late. Okay, thank you, Ryan.
All right, well, thank you very much. I've got a couple of things here to answer or add on to the presentation in many ways. The first one about UKIP, BNP. And I mean, I naturally, when I see something that to me is populism, I'll pick it up. It could be proposed or anything on the streets. I'll keep it and I just put it with my bits and pieces. And this is one that I think it was in 2009, and it's Sid Chitney Colchester, BNP. And what I did find very interesting is that he puts, I can't remember his name, you remember his name, the chap of BNP? That's it, yeah, and he puts Winston Churchill. So really, he's got nothing to do with Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill was a conservative, but he is trying to bring back the past. He wants to emphasize that, you know, what Churchill managed to defend and make sure that the Germans didn't get to the UK. That was part of the Churchill kind of discourse. He's trying to use that to his own political advantage. Now, the problem with BNP is that he's just very, very radical, whereas UKIP is a very moderate, central, conservative type of market. I'll give you an example that my stepmother's brother, he's been a UKIP supporter for the last 15, 20 years. He's a very, very conservative. And he did say to me that he met Nigel Farage, that he's a very, very nice chap. Do you know, he likes to drink, he likes to smoke, he likes to have a good time, something that other politicians don't do. So somehow, naturally, Nigel Farage knows how to interact with the Conservatives, with the centre-right. But what is interesting is that I think a lot of BNP, that they are somehow getting themselves to the centre. They voted for UKIP, not the BNP, because BNP does not really have a future, whereas UKIP could be an anti-Euro party. The Conservatives are supposed to be Eurosceptics, but they can't do it because it's already part of the institutional apparatus. Now they're saying that if they win the elections next year, they're going to have a referendum whether to leave or not Europe. You know, Cameron promised to do it during his first administration. He didn't do it because you just cannot do it. But really, what questions are you going to put in a referendum? And Nigel Farage, it gets right to the core of it. And I think a lot of British people do sympathise with what he's actually articulating. But BNP is not doing that. And this actually refers to Dimitra's question in a way, the past, the history. Yeah, history is a key element. And that's one of the things that are nostalgic memories. It's fantasizing how things were before. The UK is no longer the UK. It's a multicultural society by default, not by design. It's chaos. And the natives don't like it. Somehow they want things to go back to how they were before. So there is constantly, the past is an important element in the discourse a populist articulates. And they know how to do it. Naturally, they do it. They are good actors. They are natural actors. Charlie was an excellent actor. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger, he was elected twice as the governor of California. That guy couldn't even speak English properly. And they also talked about getting him as the candidate of the Republican Party for the presidency, but he was born in Austria, so they couldn't really do it. Yeah. Yeah, the question in terms of adding more things, in terms of loyalty, trust, devotion, contingency. I was thinking of adding another one, which will be magic. And in a way, where would I put magic here? And magic, to me, will be the leader. Because the leader is the person that could somehow put everything together. And the leader could also be the person responsible to have some form of contingency if something happens. How are we going to reproduce the populist discourse and still make it effective electorally? That could be about loyalty, trust. That's the problem at the moment in Venezuela. There is no more trust. Maduro is not a leader. He's not a populist. He's not a leader. And there are just too many factions in power at the moment in Venezuela. So there is a revolution with no leader. I'm not sure what other ones we got here. Oh, another very good question, comment about the type of discourse of populist users. That happened in Venezuela, and Chavez used to have the Aló Presidente, which was a Sunday TV show, and it could go on up to 8 hours, and people loved it. It's almost like a soap opera, and Venezuelans do have an addiction to soap operas. So Chavez managed to use that for his own political propaganda. And what I did find also very interesting, that the kind of, the way Chavez spoke, people used to pick it up. And all of a sudden, everyone was trying to imitate Chavez. So because of the TV, because of the constantly somehow brainwashing the population, everyone, the speech, the Venezuelan accent started to change more to the Chavez Venezuelan accent. And they don't realize that because they live there, and the way the language changes, they are totally unaware. But me being abroad, half of my life, I could automatically realize, well, things are changing automatically, and everything seems to be like Chavez. Everybody wants to be Chavez. And that's also part of we're all Chavez. So that's part of the populist propaganda in many ways. And of course, you mentioned that that's happened in Greece too, and of the effectiveness, or how that's another form of populism. Emotional energy, yeah. Totalitarian, well, that's a big one. I've got a book. I bought it about 2 or 3 years ago, and I haven't read it. It's Mein Kampf. Hitler, I think, is one of the most fascinating politicians ever. He was a populist, and he was democratically elected, and he totally changed the institution. And I think we could see populism gets into totalitarianism. And I think that's another thing I'm working on, is cult of personality, looking at Lenin, on how cult of personalities has worked in Latin America, particularly in Perón, and other dictatorships, caudillos in Latin America. I mean, this is a draft. I thought about it, and I did it for the presentation, but of course I need to continue thinking about it and try to refine this in one way or the other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just give us 2 or 3 minutes to prepare for the next panel.
Thank you very much. We had 4 very stimulating presentations, and there are many insights that will be very productive for our work, and I have already made a list. But we are running, I would like to add many more things, but we are running a little bit behind schedule. So if there are any pressing questions, we can collect them, have a set of quick answers from our panel, and then go for the coffee break.
Yes, thank you. Um, so sorry, I missed the first one, the first presentation, but just a couple of points. First of all, to Mr. Apastathis, just a note, I mean, it's not an objection of any sort. It's just that I think we should be aware of the danger of essentialization of the church. The Church of Greece or whatever else is not one thing. It's a field of oppositions, of different ideas, of different interests. And within this church, you see a certain discourse which comes very close to the left, so-called progressive enlightened bishops or whatever, Anastasios of Albania and others or whatever, who have also European education, etc. And you see the other side, which comes very close to Golden Dawn rhetoric of Anthimos or Piraeus bishop or whatever. So it seems within this church there is a dynamic field of oppositions and antagonisms. Maybe you're talking about the leadership of the church, but again, the leadership of the church is a contest, an open field. So it's not the church, it's all these things happening within the Orthodox Church or whatever, just to point this out. Second thing, because I missed yesterday's introductory speech by Yanis, are we talking about one or many populism? Is there an essence to populism? And then there are varieties of right-wing, left-wing, or whatever, middle, or are they constitutively different definitions of populism? Is there one populism or many? And second point to Mr. Katsabekis, this slogan by Tsipras is quite interesting. It's not just the aporia of how to define Laos or the people or whatever. It's also quite interesting in the sense that he starts from the most general, the people who live in Greece, goes to a more restricted sense, those who suffer, who it's not everybody, not everybody suffers in Greece, right? And goes to the even more specific, those who fight, those who take a stance, political or otherwise or whatever. So it's quite clever as a slogan. And it's interesting to analyze that. I don't think he does that by accident or just because he doesn't know how to define the people. He wants to include and exclude at the same time a number of people there. And, you know, I just wonder if you have a comment on that. Thank you.
Nico.
Thank you. Very briefly, I was very much impressed by the first speaker, Giardelli. And your analysis was, and the others as well, was based on, was referred to an aggregate level. That is to say that, as you said, the analysis of populism helps us to understand the way the right-wing extremist parties, etc., grow and appear, grow and move on. Something which I think misses generally in the Greek research on populism and is empirical research on individual level using, for instance, different scales of xenophobia, of Islamophobia. So it's one thing, very useful, I do it myself, to keep thinking and analyzing at a aggregate general level, yes, but then you have to ground it into earth in order to triangulate your research findings using microsociological tools such as I said before, scales of different kinds. And there has been a great tradition in political psychology and empirical political analysis on that. So time has come, I think, to bridge the the two perspectives. Yeah.
Okay, let's have some quick answers.
If I may, for the second one, just as an information for the sake of the argument, here I have in front of me the research result of a project of youth in Greece, contemporary Greece. I did it myself, but it is unpublished yet, and it is forbidden to be published because it was done for the sake of an organization who is not, they don't want it to be published anyhow. But there I have the potential the young potential Golden Dawn. And I made a regression analysis here, and of course I used
Um, so I'll give you, hello, an answer regarding if there is one populist phenomenon or many. Is that correct? That was your question. So my opinion is that populism is one single phenomenon. As I said, it has some very specific ideological features, ideological characteristics, and in that sense, it can function as an ideology. Functioning as an ideology, as I mentioned, it can be combined, easily combined with very different other ideologies. So apart from the differences that exist, there are some structural characteristics that are in common, and populism can express them, of course with some differentiations, but the phenomenon is a single phenomenon. And to use Moody's definition on populism, he defines populism as an ideology that separates society into two homogeneous and antagonistic groups, and it expresses and articulates the popular demands, the social demands, and turns them against the establishment. If we can see these two characteristics in every political discourse, this means that they're populistic, they're populist. So populism can, if these two characteristics are confirmed in every political discourse, then we are eligible to say that the phenomenon is one, it's a single phenomenon. That's what I think.
Well, thank you for the feedback. The first question, the danger of essentialism. I totally agree with you. However, there are bishops who support the Golden Dawn. There is only one bishop who declared his hostility to the party, and all the others have kept a neutral stance. Even the moderate bishop of of Volos, he even has a photo before the elections with the candidate of the Golden Dawn in his region. So what I mean, there was no any reaction by the church for any practice of the Golden Dawn. And my paper is about the institutional church. It's about the church as an organization, as a bureaucracy. I agree with the concept that the church is not the institution, but my paper focuses on the institution and the discourse of the official discourse of the institution, and of the Greek church, of the Church of Greece, because there are many Orthodox churches, even within the Greek state. Of course, the Patriarchate of Constantinople or the Archbishop of Albania, Anastasius, will articulate a different discourse towards the Golden Dawn or radical right, exactly because the context within which they operate is different. In Albania or in Turkey, they are the minority. They are not the majority. They are not considered to be part of the people. But you are completely right about the danger of essentialism. Because
it's about power. It's about who holds power. This group or the other group, this person or the other person. It's a field of contest. That's what I'm
Of
saying.
course it is. Yeah. Certainly it is. But even the moderate Archbishop Hieronymus, he himself has not declared his opposition to the Golden Dawn. There was a leak to the press by his environment that he's against the Golden Dawn. But he didn't make any public statement on that. As far as Professor Demirci's feedback, thank you so much. I have tried also to make some regressions on populism. I've made based on the 5 rounds of the European Social Survey. And though for nativism, nationalism, and authoritarianism, there is a link, religion works as a mediating channel, there is a problem with populism. And the other problem is that there are no data about the Golden Dawn per se as a party. And so, to be honest, I'm waiting for the next round of the survey to make the regression.
Although the survey is not enough.
Exactly. I totally agree. There are so many objections, and but Moody, in his work on the pathological normalcy thesis, I don't think that he is convincing as far as his empirical testing is concerned. He just uses Eurobarometer and just says, that's it, and okay, take it or leave it. But this is a broad problem of how to... Yeah, I agree with you.
So very, very briefly, thank you, Iraklis, for your questions. So to follow on Anastasia's remarks, with which I will have to disagree, even though I really liked her presentation, I don't think that we should conceptualize populism as a single phenomenon. I mean, also I think we cannot conceptualize it as an ideology. I mean, any definition of ideology presupposes some core values. Even the thin ideology thesis that we find in Frieden and Moody uses presuppose some core values, some minimal core values, and it's absolutely possible to find the same core values in all populist phenomena. I mean, there is a vast variety of populist phenomena. We start from the Narodniki in 19th century Russia, we pass to the People's Party, then we have 40s and 50s populism in Latin America, Perón, Vargas, and so on. We passed Papandreou, and now all these new social movements, the Aganaktismeni, the Occupy Wall Street, Podemos now in Spain, which comes from the Indignados movement, make the picture so diversified and differentiated that it's really hard for me to imagine them sharing some common core values or even a common ideology. What I think is a better way to conceptualize populism, this is something that we are trying to do in the Populismus project, to operationalize this conception, is to see populism as a way to articulate certain elements in order to create and interpolate a collective subject, the popular subject, the people, as opposed to the power bloc and elite, which is, of course, the definition that Laclau gives already by the mid-70s. On your second remark, yes, you're absolutely right. It's very, very interesting how Tsipras chooses his words. And I believe that it is always a matter of keeping a very fragile balance between exclusion and inclusion. You never have only inclusion or only exclusion. You always have to exclude something in order to create an identity. As far as his choosing of words, the suffering and so on, I believe that there is an ideological, political ideological element, of course, in there, because as a left wing, he wants to stress that the people are suffering, but at the same time, they're reacting, they're struggling. Yeah, and it's the emotional aspects on which hopefully we hear a lot of interesting stuff from Professor Demergis later. That's all for now.
If I may add something to your question, and having this dialogue with Yorgos, I say that the populist schema, that's the same thing, which is applied each and every time in a different way. Of course, the values are not the same. Nobody can argue that. But the schema and the way the two blocks are constructed, that is what I think it's the common thing, and that is what prevails every time. So in that sense, it's a single phenomenon.
My question was epistemological, and I would refer to that at the end, at the end of the seminar. How do we build concepts in a Weberian way, as an ideal type, in a Marxist Hegelian way? How do we build these notions? There is an important epistemological questions there. We can leave it there.
No, I think this is important because the identification, the answer to the question whether it's a single phenomenon or a multiplicity of phenomena will not emerge from experience itself or from empirical reality. So I think what you mentioned is, and what Teta also added towards the end of this panel. So, and this is why a robust theory of populism is needed, because this theory will identify the criteria that will be used in the most fruitful way in order to determine that. But I would like to add something else to that, that maybe it's not a zero-sum game. Maybe it's both. I mean, all phenomena are singular. I mean, there are no two social phenomena which are completely identical. On the other hand, there are, in every social phenomenon, in all social phenomena, there are aspects which are the same. So we have to, this theory that I was talking about, and that we might have the opportunity to discuss about towards the end in the round table, can also help us with that. Choose the right level of generalization in which singularity and universality, let's say, will sort of communicate.
It's about social scientific discourse, and I think
Nico, keep it for the last panel. Okay, just 1 minute. So we can go for a typically common definition. Coffee break, coffee break. Thank you very much. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of questions. Okay. Vemont.
Yes. I got the feeling that the talk was not so much about populism at all, but more about party competition and where you see the tendency that you, like you used the name, to demonize some parties, or to use anthropological terminology, to make some impure, to get them outside of the political competition, and which I've seen also in many other countries, and it sometimes is really embarrassing that the large established party can't address the issue that these parties are raising, but are demonizing the parties instead. Yeah.
You have a very interesting presentation. Really, what really got me thinking is in terms of abstention. And even in Venezuela, there is an abstention problem. About 45% they decide just not to vote. So it's not just a European problem. So in a way, it might not be a bad idea to do some real research on abstention rather than populism. I mean, you didn't get into discourse, but I could see of what you're trying to focus here. And it's in terms of vote for nobody, really, it's almost, it's part of the emotions, you know, abstaining. So if you sort of clarify, abstention is the key theme here.
Yes, I have a number of points, very, very briefly, and if you want to answer to any of these. First of all, I think the success of the extreme right-wing parties is that they have imposed, they have permeated the mainstream. Their policies and their rhetoric, that's their big success. And that leads to the second point. Things that we wouldn't dare to discuss in Europe in the aftermath. Aftermath means decades after the Second War, are now mainstream, are now being discussed. People wouldn't dare to discuss these things in the 60s, in the 70s, even in the 80s. And that's very big success. They have entered the mainstream political party. And that is, for me, a big danger. I wonder also, this is an academic gathering, but what is your political message? You did say, of course, that you're not saying we shouldn't worry. But for us in Greece, things are different. Of course, I understand you are talking about the UK and France. But I want to point out that Greece, the ex-socialist countries, UK, etc., have very hard Nazi neo-fascist parties. It's not the light, no sugar, no additives, extreme right of the other European countries. We're talking about Hitlerite parties. And we should think about the political message of all that. I see a hardening and authoritarianization of mainstream politics with regards not only to immigrants, but towards democracy as a general. You did point that out. I'm just trying to pull a few strands of what you were saying. Also, we had the discussion yesterday. I see a shift in the rhetoric of the right-wing parties from extreme exclusion to inclusion. They are now talking to new audiences, to new voters, to the young, to the unemployed, not the working class, the underclass, the unemployed. We're talking about a country with 1.5 million people unemployed. We're talking about officially 16 million, a lot more unemployed in the EU. And they are a prime target, and others. So I see all these things. I have a question of how we define the extreme right as opposed to the rest of the right parties. And is there anything in between? In Greece, we had parties like Laos, even the ANEL, which was mentioned in the previous session, has overtones of that, but at the same time, it's not an extreme right party. I think we need to think about the history of fascism, which had a clear, as far as I'm concerned, populist content. I'm talking about Mussolini and Hitler. We also need to think, we had this discussion in the break, whether there is an essence of ideology, populism or whatever it is, but a different public rhetoric. They're shifting their public rhetoric. You used a very nice word, mainstreaming. And that's interesting to see this dynamic shift. I have all these questions on all these levels with regards to the very interesting things you're saying, and I think they do need a clarification. How is this rhetoric shifting? Why is it becoming more acceptable? Are we to worry about this thing? Because for us in Greece, it's not just a theoretical problem. It's also a problem in the streets. For us living in Athens, maybe less in Thessaloniki, there are these groups of Nazis, or fascists, or of Golden Dawn, in certain areas of Athens. And with this particular version of activism they have, without much ideological content, they go there and solve their social problems. And that's also an element that we should, not so much the ideology, but let's go and do it. That type of thing.
Thanks a lot for your quite interesting presentation. If not anything else, you shifted a little bit the border of the summarization. So, abstention, yes, maybe this is the point of focus. Then the crisis of democracy, as you described it, apparently is also a crisis of political communication, in the way you present that, or a crisis of public communication. Then, and then coming back to the abstention issue, I would say that that it might not be populism itself which explains abstention, but it is another maybe much more widespread public mood among Western democracies as well as non-Western democracies, which is cynicism. A widespread cynicism which is multifaceted, it's not unidimensional. Cynicism of the elites and the cynicism at the bottom-up cynicism, which at the end of the day leads to an ostensible kind of democracy, leads to abstention, of course, and in a way it functions as a legitimation through disbelief, according to Goldfrapp's notorious saying. And it is amazing that in this last slide you are presenting us, actually the wordings correspond somehow to the
media, they want to represent the people. So their enemy, in a way, is the part. And this kind of figure, we can see it all over the Europe. So maybe, in your argument, I don't know how you can answer this suggestion, but maybe this slide and the other slide can be connected. And the second point, and last, it has to do with, I'm wondering, while you are speaking a lot about how the media, the media coverage of the rising of the right, what is your suggestion? I mean, here you are trying, while you are showing us the registered voters or other figures, to normalize or to box it down, to limit down the impressions of the media they are, the impression that the media they are building to the public sphere. So, what is your suggestion, please? Thank you.
Good question. Okay, yeah, I've taken a few notes, but let me know if I don't answer your questions precisely enough. Yeah, thank you for all the questions and for being very brief as well, because there's quite a few questions. Yeah, lots of interesting things. I mean, unfortunately, obviously, I mean, I have 40 minutes or 30 minutes. I don't know how long it was, so I could only say certain things. But a lot of it I've considered, and other things I think will help me. Again, as I said, it's a new project. So, populism versus party competition. Yes, it was at the top. Yeah, but I mean. That's true. I'm not looking at populism the way I think populism has been looked at, if you want. What I'm looking at populism is as a concept, and in a way as a tool of excluding alternatives, or as a tool for negating alternatives. So that's true. So I mean, the way I'm looking at populism really is its use and misuses, and mostly within elite discourse. But in the article, again, I talk about populism a bit more in my book as well. But yeah, here what I'm focusing on really is this elite discourse and the way things are used, not used to either mainstream or to negate, either be it the extreme right or be it the people or something like that. So that's really what I'm interested in. Abstention. Did I answer your question? Yeah? Yep. Abstention, well, yeah, I mean, one thing that I want to stress again about abstention is there are many facets. One that I didn't mention is also people are just happy with the system. You know, I mean, with the European elections, a lot of people actually are not against Europe. If they don't vote, it's because they don't care. You know, they like traveling across Europe, they like other things, but they don't see the point of the European Commission and all these kind of things because they don't understand it, and they can't be bothered because they don't feel they can influence it. So again, very, very many facets on abstention. Just a few more words on abstention and research on abstention. First, in the UK, quite interestingly, there's no research on abstention, or next to none. It's something that I got interested in recently, and I couldn't find anything. I asked colleagues, quite prominent colleagues who work on political behavior and so on, and I got some interesting responses, saying like, why would anyone research abstention? It's impossible, it's too hard, which says something about academia, really. It's like, oh, it's too hard, so yeah, I'm not going to do that. So nothing in the UK, proving that it's not too hard. There's a lot of research on abstention, or it's really grown in the last 10 years in France. Some really, really good books on abstention, on the demonization of abstention, on the facets of abstention. People like Nona Meyer have started to do some good work on in a project that's called Vote Pauvre, Poor Vote, in a way, with a research team. So there should be some really good stuff coming out on abstention. This is not my aim, though. My aim is not really to study abstention. It's not that I'm not interested. I'm really, really interested. But other people are doing it. People who have more of an expertise than I do. What really I want to do is to look at abstention within the elite discourse and the way it is portrayed, the way it is, again, misnamed, misused, underplayed, overplayed, played negatively, positively. This is really the way I want to see, what I want to see, because to me, what's interesting in abstention is it's massive, and yet we hardly talk about it. And when we talk about it, we just kind of push it to the side. Who cares? People abstain, but it means nothing. Well, I think it's a bit of a cop-out. So what I want to see is actually the meaning behind abstention is really what I want to look at. The mainstream permeated the... I wasn't looking at the right person, actually. Oh, it was Ryan, the question. But yeah, the mainstream. It was my previous project, actually, so I didn't talk about it very much. But my book is actually called The Mainstreaming of the Extreme Right, a Populist Hegemony, ? it's what I talk about. I mean, I look at the process of mainstreaming extreme right ideas. So you're right. I mean, things that 20 years ago were dynamite, now you can just say them and it's fine. You know, I mean, things that Sarkozy said during his campaign. I mean, my God, like it's insane. You know, like just having a minister of identity and immigration put together, calling people from the poor neighborhood scum, say he would bring a high-pressure hose to clean it up. I mean, you know, things like the way secularism has been perverted to cover Islamophobia, you know, and target Islam is incredible. I mean, and so I did write about all of this. So I mean, if you want, I'm happy to send you some stuff and the process. And what I looked at is a comparison between France and Australia. You will tell me why France and Australia? Well, because I'm French and I lived in Australia for a long time, so that's the easy answer. But really because they're two very different countries. One is a colonial settler society. The other one is, you know, very established Western democracy, Western European democracy. Very different countries, different historical background, different constitutions, different forms of governments, different politics, and so on. But from the 1980s, you see a convergence that starts to take place towards this kind of mainstreaming of racist idea, the return of racist. You can call them ethno-exclusivist, nativist. I call them neo-racist, personally, following Balibar, really, and Barker. So, yeah, there's this interesting thing, and I think you can generalize this comparison, and you can add most countries in a way, and as you were saying, you see that in Greece and so on. What is the message? Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I mean, I should have stressed that a bit more. Yeah, but this is worrying. I mean, the Golden Dawn, of course, the neo-Nazis, the violent, and so on. The Front National worries me deeply, you know. But I think when I say that we shouldn't worry about them, is that we shouldn't worry the way we're worrying about it. If you see, because I think it has prevented actually a deeper analysis of the crisis of democracy in a way, because all we focused on was like this rise of the far right. I mean, look at what happened after the European elections. Actually, I didn't say that, but the European elections, people are telling us about the right-wing tidal wave. It's not. In the Netherlands, it went down. Wilders went down. In Belgium, De Winter went down. You know, the Vlaams Belang went down. In lots of countries, they didn't do so well, actually. So, you know, and again, I can point you to some good stuff on this as well. Talking to the unemployed, yeah, of course, but how successful? I mean, again, it's this whole question of discourse versus what's happening really on the ground as well. Yeah, they will talk to, you know, I mean, the Front National created recently a think tank for the young at university. Well, it's unlikely it's gonna work. What's worrying about it, though, is the confidence of these parties to be able to actually go and tap into milieus that are not usually typical extreme right milieus. And so that shows a confidence, the fact that they actually are not scared now to go to university or to go to the unemployed, you know, to go to these people who would have just beaten them up before. So I think that's very interesting here. Definition of the extreme right. It's something that I spent 50 pages, I think, in my book doing. I'm not happy about it, but I still spent 50 pages doing it. I mean, I'm happy defining it. I mean, I love definitions, but I'm not happy with what I come up with. But the way I define the extreme right is I have three categories, if you want. The extreme right is the mother category. For me, extreme right is a reaction to equality. So it's reaction and inequality. So at any given time, if you look at the political spectrum, the extreme right will be the most reactionary party, or if you want to look at movements, ideologies, that you have the most reactionary to equality. So I would argue that in France at the moment, the extreme right is the Front National because we have nothing else that's further, at least in the parliamentary system. Then I would argue that there's a radical right, which is what the Front National is part of, which then has ineliminable concepts such as populism. And that's where populism comes in. So I wouldn't call it populist extreme right. I wouldn't call it populist radical right. Populism is just one element of the radical right. And I think that's very important to put it this way, because if you put populist radical right, then the concept of the people really is up there. But if we can talk afterwards, and I can send you the chapter or the book if you want. I shouldn't say that. Sorry, Ashgate. I will not send my book. I will send you a link so you can buy it. Can we cut it? Yeah, well, I mean, like the mainstreaming, as I said, yeah, shameful promotion. Yeah, that's in my book, but we can talk about it afterwards. And there's more work to be done on this, but it's something that has been massively understudied, I think, in extreme right studies, and that's a shame because I think that is what is the most worrying part about the extreme right. It's not its results. It's not Marine Le Pen getting to power. It's not even Golden Dawn getting to power because it's unlikely. But what's really worrying is that concepts, as you said, that were banned, or not banned, but no one would think them. Nowadays they can. So this shift in common sense, you know.
The banalization
yeah.
of the evil.
Exactly, entirely, yeah. The return of things, I mean, and it's this common sense, but that's something that's not new. That's something that has been, you know, and in the 1980s, the extreme right, carefully, I mean, with writers like de Benoit and so on, with the Nouvelle Droite, they took Gramsci and turned it on its head and created a hegemony of the right. And they did that very successfully, and they managed to actually bring things to the fore. And lots of good stuff has been written on this as well. The crisis of political communication. Sorry, who was? Well, yeah, no, I see what you mean, really, but I would say that, no, the way I would see the crisis, really, if I had to summarize it in a nutshell, would be the crisis of empowerment, really, the crisis of democracy, as in, what does democracy mean? Nowadays, when you ask people, what is democracy, they tell you voting. I mean, that's what I asked my students in my first lecture. I said, what is democracy for you? And most of them would say voting. Some will say boring, but you know, and people have lost, I think, this question of power, if you want, of empowerment, of the question that they can do things. And at the end of the day, I mean, that's what democracy is to me. So that might answer partly the question as well. It's the question of your power, your capability, your capacity to do things. I mean, that's what. And again, it's probably not the right audience here to talk about Greek meaning and Greek etymology, but Kratos, if I'm correct, Kratos is capability. It's not just the power of the people, as in the power to govern or something like that, but it's also the capability, the power to do things, yeah? If I'm wrong, tell me. I don't see either agreement or disagreement, so maybe. Okay, all right. But, and so I think that's important, to reclaim this empowerment. I think people are really optimistic. In many surveys, people are shown to be very optimistic. The young are shown to be very optimistic. They want something different in a way, but they feel completely powerless. And that's where the cynicism that you're talking about here, which is, this is what I'm referring to. Cynicism, yeah, definitely. Distrust as well is another word we could use here. The media, and I could talk about it more, but I think I should skip a few things here. The media, yeah, well, they are part of the elite discourse, so that's why, yeah, what I mean by elite discourse in my project is, yeah, media coverage, academia, and politicians, obviously. So, yeah, there was a fantastic survey that I came across. Again, like I'm not a survey person, but I thought, like, use the weapon of you know, the enemy against them. There was this interesting Eurobarometer survey, 3 questions to the same people. The first question was, what is, according to you, the 2 main issues facing your country? And they had a list of 15 issues, I think. Immigration came 4th. So 4th, you know, quite a few people, I think it was maybe 17% of the people who were interviewed said immigration is one of the 2 main issues facing my country. You can think 17% is actually not that high when you think about it. Oh no, it was facing Europe, the first one. Yeah, facing Europe, it was actually, yeah, the top one, and it was 17%. Then facing my country, it went down a little. It was, I think, 6th or 7th. I could give you the precise numbers, and it was 12%. Then when you ask people the same question, same wording, but except instead of country or Europe, you said the main issues facing your life. It fell down to 3%, and it was 13th out of 14 issues. So, I mean, it shows here the power of the media, the power of suggestion, agenda setting, and all these kind of things, which is, when you talk about Europe, you're worried about immigration. When you talk about your country, you're worried about immigration. Not massively, but you are. But when you talk about your day-to-day life, immigration completely subsides, you know. And what were people worried about? Unemployment, healthcare, tax, actually, somehow, tax. They were worried about tax. And a lot of other people before immigration. And I think, I mean, I know it's just a survey, and it, you know, it can be massively criticized because they're not perfect, but it shows something very interesting here in the agenda setting of immigration, you know. And finally, suggestion regarding the media. It's hard to say, you know. I mean, there are lots of things that are being done. In France, there's a website called Mediapart, for example, which has some really good analysis, but it's very elitist. First, it's not super expensive, but it's probably 100 euros a year. You know, lots of people would not spend 100 euros to read, you know, academics or something like that. Second, well, you know, it is elitist as well. It's, I mean, the elite talking to the elite, be they left-wing elite at the end of the day. So I don't know. Is it renationalization of things or more competition and things like that? I mean, I'm not a media specialist, so I don't think, you know, I mean, my answer wouldn't be very convincing, I think, and it would be, but yeah, we can talk about it more over a beer maybe. That's more of a heated discussion, I think, that we need to have. Yeah. Yeah, no, of course. I mean, when I say I disagree with Chantal Mouffe, I mean, you know, as I said at the beginning, she's been very influential for me, and you know, what she was writing in 2005 on populism, I agree entirely with. But where I disagree with Chantal Mouffe is not necessarily on populism or on the need to reclaim populism and all these things. Where I disagree is on where to do it in a way, if you want, in the political space. Chantal Mouffe feels that we should partake in the hegemony to kind of change it from the inside, and I shouldn't call it hegemony, but she feels that we should partake in the parliamentary system. You know, we should join it, and we should create a party, and we should either join Syriza, join the Front de Gauche in France, and things like that. I don't feel this is going to work. Why? Because maybe I'm cynical, but also because for me it's not only self-defeating, but it's also in a way. Well, yeah, no, it is self-defeating actually. Why? Because first, it's unlikely it's going to work in a system where the media is going to, you know, be against it massively. So you might have some rise, you might have a push, you might have Syriza, you might have Golden Dawn, you might have a Front National, but it's unlikely it's going to keep rising and rising. Then it's going to be either quashed down by Sarkozy, who's going to steal away the funder, or they're going to have to compromise, as I was saying. You know, what's going to happen when Syriza, when and if Syriza gets to power? Are they going to be super radical, but then face destruction at the next elections? Or are they going to ban elections? Or are they just going to compromise and, you know, do something else? So, I mean, that'd be interesting to see that evolve, or to see a populist, left-wing populist party getting to power and see what they're going to do afterwards. The second thing why it's self-defeating as well is that I think it is in a way preventing a real reflection about the state of our democracy and the state of emancipatory politics. Why? Because by having alternatives within the system, Syriza, Front National, populist alternative within the system, you actually give an excuse to the elite to say, well, you have a choice, you just don't want it. So you know what, let's keep the status quo. And again, it's very negative and it's a bit cynical, and I'm not against alternatives on the left, you know, and certainly I'm favorable to the Front de Gauche and these kind of things, but I don't think it's the solution, and I'm very pessimistic at their possibility. Well, what I'm saying is that politics has to be done outside of the parliamentary system. I think people have to reclaim what politics mean. Politics is not just voting. Well, I don't like to be classified, I must say, but I don't like to classify myself. But yeah, I mean, it depends. You know, extreme left, a lot of extreme left is within the system as well. So it depends. I mean, I'm not against the war of position that Chantal Mouffe is talking about, but I'm not against participating necessarily in parliamentary democracy, but I'm very pessimistic at the possibility of change within parliamentary democracy, if you want. If it works, yeah, I'll be very happy. You know, I won't be like, oh, damn, like, you know, now we have a left-wing hegemony. But
Okay, I should stop your interrogation here at this point.
I might say something really bad, actually. Maybe I have already, I don't know.
Hey, thank you very much for your presentation. And now we move to the discussion. If you have any questions. No questions? Yes. Kostas. I don't know. Okay. Any other questions? No. So this is the only question.
Δεν έχω τη γνώμη ότι ο ρόλος των αρχηγών είναι τόσο σημαντικός. Έτσι. Απλώς ανέφερα την περίπτωση και του 96 και μετέπειτα, περισσότερο για να περιοδολογήσω λίγο την εποχή εκείνη με την οποία, ας πούμε, μέσα στην οποία ήταν αναγκασμένη η Νέα Δημοκρατία και η ηγετική της ομάδα να πολιτευτεί. Το βασικό ήταν ότι είχε χάσει, δηλαδή ο Καραμανλής είχε να αντιμετωπίσει ένα στρατηγικό πρόβλημα τότε, πέρα από όλα τα άλλα, ότι είχε εξωθηθεί σε ένα άκρον. Έτσι έπρεπε λοιπόν να βρει έναν τρόπο στην πραγματικότητα να απαλλαγεί από αυτό το... Έχανε τάξει στηρίγματα ιστορικά, έχανε προσβάσεις και τα δυναμικά στρώματα τα οποία έπρεπε υποτίθεται να εκπροσωπήσει δεν μπορούσε να τα εκπροσωπήσει ή δεν ήταν η εποχή του να τα εκπροσωπήσει. Έτσι στην πραγματικότητα επιχειρήσαν διάφορα τρίκ, να το πω έτσι, για να μπορέσει να εξισορροπήσει αυτή τη διείσδυση που εμφάνιζε τότε το εξυγχρονιστικό Πασόκ και στην περίπτωση του Έβερτ και στην περίπτωση του Καραμανλή. Από εκεί και πέρα εγώ έχω την αίσθηση ότι ο ρόλος των αρχηγών στην πραγματικότητα έρχεται να επιβεβαιώσει ή να μην επιβεβαιώσει μια δυναμική η οποία έχει συγκροτηθεί πολύ καιρό πριν. Μια δυναμική και στο επίπεδο των κοινωνικών συμμαχιών και στο επίπεδο της πολιτικής στρατηγικής, που όμως έχει σχηματοποιηθεί πολύ καιρό πριν. Μπορούν βεβαίως να κάνουν κάποια πράγματα, αλλά οι κινήσεις είναι περιορισμένες. Έτσι. Και στην πραγματικότητα τα πολιτικά κόμματα αντανακλούν, όπως και σήμερα, όπως και πάντοτε, αντανακλούν βαθύτερες διεργασίες, κοινωνικές διεργασίες. Αυτό άλλωστε προσπάθησε και η θεωρία των διαιρετικών το μόνο να μας υποψιάσει για την αντιπροσώπευση και για τα πολιτικά κόμματα, δηλαδή ότι είναι μακροχρόνιες διαδικασίες συγκρότησης αυτών των σχέσεων εκπροσώπησης.
Okay, meanwhile, we have 3 more questions. Okay. So first is Thomas, then Nikos, and Spyros. Δεν έχω μικρόφωνο. Όχι. Δεν δουλεύει. Okay. Να τα μαζέψουμε όλα. Ναι.
Και έχει ενδιαφέρον να το απαντήσω ευθείας.
Εντάξει, αλλά... Νίκος, ναι.
Εγώ ήθελα και στον κύριο Περαδάκη να ερώτησή μου. Ήθελα να ρωτήσω αν οι πολιτικές του Μνημονίου σηματοδοτούν τη δημιουργία μιας νέας διαιτητικής τομής και αν ποιοι θα είναι αυτοί οι δύο άξονες στην οποία θα γίνει η διαιτητική τομή. Και σε σχέση με το κομματικό σύστημα για το 2014, μήπως σηματοδοτεί τη δημιουργία ενός κομματικού συστήματος 2,5 κομμάτων, δηλαδή 2 κόμματα που θα αναγράψουν στην εξουσία και ένα κόμμα μπαλαντέρ που είτε θα σχηματίζει είτε θα συμμαχεί με το ένα κόμμα είτε με το
τον πολιτή. Ας πούμε, σκεφτόμουν τη συζήτηση με τα κόρπορα που λέγαμε στην πρώτη συνεδρία που ξεκινήσαμε, που μπορούμε να δούμε, για παράδειγμα, το πώς, αν χρησιμοποιήσουμε και μια μεθοδολογία έτσι κάπως πιο ποσοτική, να δούμε πώς ένα σημαίνον μία λέξη, το οποίο η λέξη λαός, για παράδειγμα, ξαφνικά αποκτάει μία εκθετική, φοβερή χρήση. Αυτό θα μπορούσαμε να υποθέσουμε ότι σχετίζεται με έναν μετασχηματισμό των διαιτητικών τομών ή με κάτι που θα μπορούσαμε να το συσχετίσουμε με αυτά που συζητούμε εδώ. Δηλαδή, πώς θα το βλέπατε αυτό το πράγμα. Αυτό είναι κάτι που μας ενδιαφέρει. Αυτό είναι και του Τάσου ενδεχομένως. Το λέω και για τους δύο.
Δηλαδή, πώς θα μπορούσε να καταγραφεί, ας πούμε, η αύξηση της χρήσης του σημαίνοντος λαού, για παράδειγμα, σε αυτά που στη μεθοδολογία που μας παρουσίασε.
Στο επίπεδο του πολιτικού λόγου με τους κοινωνικούς μετασχηματισμούς και την αναπροσαρμογή των διαιτητικών τομών στο επίπεδο το κομματικό. Δεν λέω προφανώς υπάρχει αυτό το πράγμα. Θέλω να πω μεθοδολογικά πώς θα μπορούσε. Α, εντάξει, μεθοδολογικά. Ναι, οκ. Ναι, ναι. Ωραία. Λοιπόν, προφανώς η έννοια του λαϊκισμού αρνητικά φορτισμένη και ταυτισμένη με τον περονισμό, τον φασισμό ή τον χιτλερισμό εμφανίζεται πολύ πριν την αυριανή στο ελληνικό δημόσιο λόγο. Το χαρακτηριστικότερο βιβλίο είναι σε εκδόσεις Παρατηρητής εδώ στη Θεσσαλονίκη ένα συλλογικός τόμος για το Πασόκ. Το Πασόκ πριν γίνει κυβέρνηση. Όπου δεσπόζει το άρθρο, υπάρχουν δύο ειδών προσεγγίσεις. Η μία προσέγγιση είναι από την τυπική δεξιά, τυπικούς διανοούμενους της τότε δεξιάς, και η άλλη προσέγγιση είναι από τη γραμμή Ελεφάντη, Άγγελο Ελεφάντη, ο οποίος είναι ο κατεξοχήν θεωρητικός, ο οποίος προσάπτει το Πασόκ την έννοια του λαϊκισμού, αλλά εντελώς άσχετα με τη συζήτηση την οποία κάνουμε και στερνιζόμαστε και πολύ πριν. Και μάλιστα πυροδοτεί μία τότε παρέμβαση του Βασίλη Καπετανιάννη εκείνα τα χρόνια και στον Πολίτη και νομίζω ότι υπάρχει και στον Τόμο, ο οποίος για πρώτη φορά εισάγει και την έννοια του μετασχηματισμού και της ηγεμονίας και του Λακλάου στη συζήτηση, απατώντας την πραγματικότητα στον Ελεφάντη για αυτή την κατηγορία. Πριν το 70, όχι. Πριν το 70 έχουμε δικτατορία. Δεν νομίζω ότι συζητιούνται τέτοια πράγματα. Έτσι, δεν έχω υπόψη μου. Δηλαδή και στη δεκαετία του 60, δηλαδή αν εννοείς δεκαετία του 60, δεν έχω κάτι υπόψη μου. Η συζήτηση νομίζω ότι ανοίγει και με αυτή την έννοια το βιβλίο αυτό είναι πολύ σημαντικό και δεν υπάρχει τότε αυριανή, έτσι. Δεν υπάρχει. Άλλωστε η αυριανή τώρα, για να αποφορτήσουμε και λίγο εντάξει, ανεξαρτήτως του τι είναι η αυριανή, έτσι, μην το συζητήσουμε αυτό το θέμα, καταλαβαίνετε όλοι. Αλλά η αυριανή τι είναι όμως σαν εφημερίδα, Θωμά, εσύ που είσαι και δημοσιογράφος, έτσι. Είναι στην ουσία η εισαγωγή, η είσοδος στο αναγνωστικό κοινό ενός πολυπληθούς κόσμου, ο οποίος δεν διάβαζε μέχρι τότε εφημερίδες. Δηλαδή είναι μια νέα, που το μετασχηματίζει και το μεταπλάθει στο λόγο, στην αντίληψη, στην εικόνα που είχε τότε η αυριανή, η οποία... Τι πράγμα? Ναι, και αργότερα βεβαίως μεταξελίσσεται. Αλλά η μεγάλη της εμπορική επιτυχία, ας πούμε, ποια είναι? Είναι ότι εισάγει στην ανάγνωση ανθρώπους που δεν διαβάζανε. Έτσι. Λοιπόν, το ένα είναι αυτό. Το δεύτερο είναι για τα κινήματα. Προφανώς δεν υπάρχουν, προφανώς δεν μπορώ να... Δεν ήταν στο αντικείμενό μου να συζητήσω, ας πούμε, πια τις πολύ μικρές, ας πούμε, διαιρετικές τομές οι οποίες εμφανίζονται κάθε φορά σε κάθε περίοδο και αυτά συναθρίζονται κατά κάποιο τρόπο ή έρχονται και συμπυκνώνονται κάποια στιγμή. Αλλά η διαιρετική τομή είναι ακριβώς αυτό. Είναι ένα σημείο αποφασιστικής τομής, θα έλεγε κανείς. Έτσι. Όπου μπορούν όλα οι επιμέρους κοινωνικές διεργασίες να αποκτήσουν μια συνολική ταυτότητα. Δηλαδή μπορούμε να έχουμε πολλά κινήματα, μπορούμε να έχουμε πολλές επιμέρους ρήξεις, αλλά χρειάζεται όμως εκείνη η στιγμή όπου όλα αυτά θα έρθουν και θα πέσουν στο ίδιο ποτάμι, στην ίδια κήτη. Έτσι. Και ακριβώς, ας πούμε, σε αυτό το επίπεδο η μελέτη των κοινωνικών κινημάτων είναι αποφασιστική. Δεν το συζητώ, απλώς είναι θέμα αφήγησης στα πλαίσια μιας εισήγησης. Το μνημόνιο αποτελεί διαιρετική τομή, είναι αναμφισβήτητο. Είναι η νέα διαιρετική τομή, είναι η διαιρετική τομή η οποία έχει δημιουργήσει μια τομή στην παλαιά τομή, την εμφυλιακή, την τομή δεξιάς-αριστεράς ή δεξιάς-αντιδεξιάς, δημιούργησε μια διαφορετική τομή που είναι η υποστήριξη ή η μη υποστήριξη σε αυτές τις πολιτικές, οι οποίες δεν είναι αποσπασματικές πολιτικές, στην ουσία είναι ένα κοινωνικό σχέδιο, έτσι. Που παράγει ιδεολογία, που παράγει υπευθυνότητα ή ανευθυνότητα, που παράγει συνένεση ή μη συνένεση, που παράγει δημοκρατία ή μη δημοκρατία κλπ. Έτσι, είναι διαιρετική τομή, σαφέστατα. Και γι' αυτό ακριβώς το λόγο πρέπει να είμαστε και λίγο προσεκτικοί και στην τοποθέτηση των πολιτικών κομμάτων πάνω σε αυτή την τομή. Δηλαδή, είναι προφανές σήμερα ότι υπάρχουν. Δηλαδή, είναι πάρα πολύ, για να το πω λιγάκι ακραία, ας πούμε, να φέρω ένα ακραίο παράδειγμα για το κομματικό σύστημα, είναι πάρα πολύ, ας πούμε, κατά τη γνώμη μου, ακραίο, άδικο ή δεν παράγεται τέλος πάντων, ότι το φαινόμενο, ας πούμε, το μόρφωμα ανεξάρτητοι Έλληνες, ας πούμε, που το ταυτίζουμε πάρα πολύ εύκολα με τη Χρυσή Αυγή. Είναι δύο διαφορετικά πράγματα, εντελώς διαφορετικά πράγματα. Δεν έχουν καμία σχέση μεταξύ τους. Καμία. Έτσι. Παράγονται σε διαφορετικές ακριβώς τοποθετήσεις πάνω σε αυτές τις τομές που υπάρχουν. Έτσι. Αλλά είναι μια συζήτηση που αφορά το κάθε κόμμα πια και το χαρακτήρα του συγκεκριμένα, που μην μπούμε σε αυτή τη συζήτηση. Τώρα για το τι θα συμβεί στο κομματικό σύστημα δεν μπορώ να σου απαντήσω, διότι κανείς δεν ξέρει, είναι πολύ απλό. Έτσι, και δεν ξέρω αν θα είμαστε σε καταστάσεις 2,5 κομμάτων κτλ. Είναι σαφές όμως ότι σήμερα οι δομές που εμφανίζονται, η πολυπλοκότητα των αντιπροσωπεύσεων που φαίνεται να υπάρχει, τίνει περισσότερο σε ένα πολυκομματισμό. Ή αν όχι σε πολυκομματισμό, πάντως ας πούμε σίγουρα όχι σε δικομματισμό. Έτσι. Άρα, αλλά αυτό μένει να αποδειχθεί κιόλας, έτσι δεν είναι σαφές. Τώρα, σε αυτό που είπε ο Γιάννης, είναι φοβερά ενδιαφέρον το θέμα, έχουμε τα εργαλεία να το κάνουμε. Εγώ νομίζω ότι πρέπει να πάμε αντίστροφα και μεθοδολογικά, να προσδιορίσουμε τι ακριβώς φορτία έχουν αυτά το σημαίνον λαό σήμερα και μεθοδολογικά να μετρήσουμε τι τομή παράγει ή τι αντιθέσεις, να το πω τομή, τι αντιθέσεις παράγει στο πεδίο της ιδεολογίας. Αυτό είναι ένα φοβερά ενδιαφέρον ερευνητικό project, το οποίο μακάρι να έχουμε τη δυνατότητα να το υλοποιήσουμε. Έτσι, θα είναι και στο πεδίο των ποσοτικών, ας πούμε, μεθόδων, θα είναι τρομακτικά ενδιαφέρον. Αυτά.
In English? Okay. I could mention four points. The first point is that the cleavage that you mentioned is, from one side, it used to be left, right, and center periphery for many years in the past. Right now it's memorandum, mnemonio, anti-memorandum, and close to Europe, away from Europe. This is the change from 2009 to 2012, and this seems to have prevailed right now. Secondly, we presented to you the tools in, let's say, two different uses. The first use is that you can see that we have a huge database from 1985 to 2012 that includes all these demographic variables, plus almost 200 to 250 questions for each election. From 85 to 2012, we have a sample for each election answering all these demographic variables, plus all the questions about issues, about party preference, about the previous party preference, etc. And it is harmonized, and you can see it comparatively from in a time, let's say, dimension. And this vast database can answer more or less any question that you have about the Greek voter. It's still in a very primitive manner, but any kind of question that you build about the Greek can be answered through this database from 1985 to 2012. And the second use of this tool is that while we're in the process of building the tool for 2014, for 2015, we can add a question that you want in a new survey. If we build the comparative European survey or another through European voter, anything, we constantly build new surveys, and you can add something as populismus and say, we want to know this very specific thing about Golden Dawn, about the voters of Anel, about the voters of PASOK.
and we can add them in our work right now. That's why I showed these diagrams of church attendance. This is an example. This we can produce through this database in a very short period of time, any kind of diagram you want. This is from one side party, from the other side time, and from the third church attendance. These are three variables. We can combine any kind of variables that you want. And this is huge. You can answer the question. And in this thing, for example, you can see that the specific 1996, 2000, 2004, this is a comment for the previous panel. I suspect that these specific years that, again, for the communist parties, and even for the communist parties and the socialists, and of course the conservatives, this is Archbishop Christodoulos, bringing everyone to a state of stating that I am close to the church. Because of him, I don't know. And from the quantitative data, perhaps with your theories, we can combine and reach, let's say, a new hypothesis.
Okay, thank you very much for both the speakers and the audience. And now we move to the next session by Professor Demerglis. Okay, thank you very much for this emotive presentation. And we can move now to discussion. We'll take only one or two questions directly to Professor Demerglis, and then we will open the floor to the wider discussion. Okay, so you first, and you. No, we don't have any microphone this time.
I've got it. Another question? I've got it.
So, I mean, that's my basic worry. Why do we need it? What does it mean? How do you think about it?
Sorry?
How do you think about this? Can it ever become an object of science, of social science? Why do we need it as a separate?
I'll start with the last one. I'm not quite sure whether I understand your first point. That is to say, do you mean that the emotional turn can be used somehow as a recipe, as a post-democratic recipe to the model of the ideal citizen? Yeah, understand. The ideal citizen is not only the one who makes a rational. The ideal citizen is the one who, if you take a look at the founding fathers of the American democracy, the Madison Papers, they are the ideal citizen is the one who participates every day, who reads newspapers, who understands politics, who can monitor the political environment. So at the end of the day, the ideal citizen is a small, an everyday Kant, a small Kant. Yes. So what people like Marcus, for instance, I don't like him very much, but at least with his Sentimental Citizen book, tries to demonstrate is that, okay, apart from this ideal of the perfect citizenry, there is an emotional substratum, an emotional intelligence, according to his terminology, where the subjects can rely on, and it's not necessary to demand everything from everyone. Then, as I said in the first part of my talk, yes, the tradition of the rational choice theory, for several years, for several decades actually, was very strong. They had a stronghold in almost every single Department of Political Science in the States. But that's not the case anymore. Like it or not, it's not the case anymore. I don't mean that it has been weighing out, no, but it has been very seriously challenged. And then we should move more decisively towards this emotion politics nexus, in order to understand aspects of political life and social life, for that matter, which were neglected by using our previous models and conceptual tools. Take, for instance, the definition of ideology. There are many different, of course, very different conceptions of ideology, but most of the time, the critical conceptualizations of ideology oppose it to some sort of either distortive knowledge or false cautions or whatever. But they remain at the level of cognition. Don't we think that all these decades, the functions of the ideological discourse, or ideologies, to be more precise, rely and take claim of emotions as well? That is to say, don't we understand nowadays that the ideological function works at the level of the affectivity? Apparently. And this was known in a way, but not brought into the surface into the surface of the public debate in Marxist tradition or in critical social theory tradition and so on. So in that sense, I think that it is a positive development that we have this sociology of emotion rather than the opposite. Then as for the same thing, yes, I know that I know about the sociology of shame. There have been some fine works on that. Personally, I'm much more familiar with Thomas F's analysis of shame, repressed shame, and unacknowledged shame, and openly expressed shame. Different. That is to say, different expressions of shame, which make for different understandings and different articulations of phenomena like racism, like nationalism, like war, like violence, interethnic violence, or even domestic violence. But shame is not necessarily leading to ressentiment, nor should we replace the analysis of ressentiment with shame. Of course, they are keen phenomena, keen emotional states, but I don't think that one can be the substitute of the other. Then let me come to Iraklis. Iraklis, I was surprised to hear from you that you know almost nothing about the sociology of emotions, but yet you were very, very negative, and you listed a catalog of accusations against it. Yeah, because I was waiting for not for such a comment, but I was waiting for more informative questions. I just brought one of the several books on the introductory books on the sociology of emotions. I can tell you that, like it or not, when you have in a discipline or subdiscipline, when you have handbooks, not just bunches of articles, or even hundreds of articles in different journals. But when you have handbooks, when you have conferences, when you have sections in different in the International Sociological Association and in the National Sociological Associations, that means that we are, and when you have journals, there will be a journal that is going to appear very soon. When you have research networks in different scientific associations, that means that we are in the way towards the formation of a discipline. If not, we have already arrived at that stage. So this is actually an epistemic fact in the international and national national division of academic labor. That's a fact. Whether we need it or not, this is another thing. I think we need it. And I think we need it because sociological accounts of emotions, of the emotions, were already there from the very beginning, in Durkheim, in Weber, in Marx, in all the classics. It was already there. We do not, by no means, we should regress from psychoanalysis. No way. Even some of the concepts I used are coming directly from psychoanalytic tradition. So I don't see why we have to be so hesitant against this this new field. Actually, it's not a new field. In the United States, it started get formed by late 70s. In mid-80s, there was a section in the American Sociological Association titled The Sociology of Emotions. In Europe, the discussion started at late 80s. So it's not something new. In Greece, of course, it's new. Many different things are new. When Lipovats and Stavrakakis, once upon a time, 20 years ago, started speaking about the Lacanian social and political theory, many colleagues were looking at them as if they were coming from the Mars. But now it has become a well-established sub-discipline in social science in Greece. I don't share your reservations on that at all.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we are moving to the closing session, which is a round table. Okay, I see.